Welcome to something special. Welcome to TEDx. This TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theaters, in workplaces, even in prisons, people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the form of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
Hello, Shermine Cruz welcoming you to TEDx Wrigleyville, winner of 6 Telly Awards. We come to you today with our 2021 program, Humanity, the Repatriation, from multiple stages, including, of course, Chicago's iconic Wrigley Field, home of the Chicago Cubs, where I'm standing right now. Coming up a little bit later in the program, we'll also take you to our stage at the Chicago History Museum. 2020 ripped us apart in more ways than we can imagine. Through disease, economics, race, politics, and beyond. Through today's program, Humanity, the Repatriation, TEDx Wrigleyville will present to you the hope of a slow return to normal, which of course takes many forms and shapes, but above all, that which we longed for more than anything throughout the last year, human reconnection. And now, to start the program, it's my honor and privilege to welcome the brilliant and talented Melissa Dupree.
Actor, comic, and playwright Melissa Dupree is a Chicago native from Humboldt Park. After earning double bachelor's degrees from the University of Houston, she returned to Chicago to join the all-Latin theater company Teatro Luna. Her one-woman show Sexomedy was developed during their monthly series for women of color in the arts and received a Chicago Reader recommendation, a members pick, and a successful debut off-Broadway in New York. TV credits include appearances on The Resident, Chicago PD, and The Chi. She is currently an ensemble member at Urban Theater Company and artistic associate at Sideshow Theater.
We did it! We did it! Hey, can I get paid now, though? Yeah,
when I was your age, I got paid in experience. Humble thyself.
Okay, está bien. Estoy aquí, trabajando de gratis. ¿Qué creen?
Hello, buenas everyone. It is my pleasure to be here for TEDx Wrigleyville today and share this remarkable programming with you. My name is Melissa Dupree. I'm an actor, playwright, musician, and activist from right here in Chicago. I'm honored to be teaming up with the TEDx Wrigleyville folks to present pieces today that elevate and center experience from the global majority that are all too often left on the margins. This incredible lineup offers 13 speakers, 12 talks, 4 performances, 2 activations, and was intentionally curated to include 4 African Americans, 1 African American Native American, 1 Afro-Latinx, 1 Indian American, 6 women, 5 men, 1 gender non-binary, and 1 white dude. But he also brought an ASL interpreter. We believe these thought-provoking talks will also inspire, energize, and educate. Before we start though, we'd like to take a moment to thank the exclusive partner of TEDx Wrigleyville, Avant. Avant is an innovative tech company headquartered right here in the city of Chicago that lowers the barriers and cost of borrowing for everyday people through personal loans and transparent borrowing, with a true and real dedication to diversity, equity, and inclusion. In addition to Avant, we'd like to thank the following sponsors, without which we could not bring you our amazing programming today. Addison & Clark, Atlas Arts Media, Peckham Media Productions, Will Byington Photography, Malus Photography, Paul Araki Elliott, AC Photography, Akira, Barnes & Thornburg LLP, the law offices of Ursula Taylor, Cruise Asset Management, Silver IP, Beauty AMS, WBS Equities LLC, Compass Real Estate and Lisa Collis, Ryan Opera Center and Lyric Opera of Chicago, Eva Bazik, Hair and Makeup Artistry, Brenda Arellano, Makeup Artist, Chaka Patterson, June Kim and Daniel Huang, Therese Connolly, Melinda Holland, Shobha Pillay, and Babak Bakhador, and Dr. Ben Levy. Well, it just wouldn't be right to bring an event that's filmed right here in the iconic Wrigley Field with anything other than the national anthem. Lucky for us, the brilliant Matilda Edge joins us, representing another iconic Chicago institution, the Lyric Opera House, as one of their remarkably talented dramatic sopranos. Bring it home for us, Miss Edge.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
And now, on to the show. Starting with our first speaker, coming to you directly from Chicago's iconic Wrigley Field. TEDx Wrigleyville is proud to welcome to our stage Betsy Ziegler. Ms. Ziegler is a lifelong problem solver and CEO of 1871, the #1 ranked private tech incubator in the world. She is here to explore with us all of the ways in which math can be used to democratize idea generation and activate our global brain.
I've been a problem solver my whole life, and I just love it. And the thing I really, really love is making big, hairy, complex problems and questions simple. Finding that core essence, that core insight, and driving to impact. The problem I'm currently obsessed with is how to democratize access and scale human engagement and connection such that we all can thrive. It's no secret that there are a lot of people left out of today's conversation. And even those that are in the conversation are doing a lot more self-editing. I believe in a meritocracy. I believe that the best ideas can come from anyone, anywhere. I believe that there's a durable path forward where we can remove bias, both personal and conformational. And the opportunity for us to step away from our attachment to status such that we can increase the solution space and allow everyone to be included. I'm always looking for analogies or parallels of where a problem has been solved in one context and we can borrow it and apply it to another one. Who's been successful in the past? Where has it been proven out? And it turns out, in this case, the natural world has figured this out and serves as a great source of insight and inspiration. I love the solitude of walking in the woods, surrounded by trees that are hundreds of years old, the sunlight creeping in, casting shadows, changing colors, birds chirping, insects buzzing. It's easy to get lost in the quiet and the tempo of your feet hitting the forest floor. In reality, the forest is not very quiet. While most of us are looking forward or looking above, underneath our feet is a vast, secretive, democratized social network of trees. All of the trees, regardless of species, sustained by a complex labyrinth of roots, bacteria, and fungi, connecting everything together. Biologists call this the wood wide web because adult trees can share sugars with younger trees. Sick trees can send resources back into the network for others to leverage. And they all can communicate with one another with respect to dangers like insect infestations. This is happening and has been happening for more than 450 million years because it's in the best interests of both parties to engage, to listen to one another, and to be rewarded in order to thrive. Now, I want you to keep this image, this picture in your head of this hidden, vastly effective system underneath your feet. And think about how we might apply it to how we communicate, how we engage with one another. The opportunity to create connection, speed, and scale of authentic engagement between widely diverse populations that may have been separated for any number of reasons. Their geography, the color of their skin, neurological or physical diversity, schools of thought, religion, age, gender. The list goes on and on. I mean, how hard can this be? Technology and social media have certainly made some things better. There's much more awareness, but the gap has been amplified. Our ability to broadcast has expanded, but our ability to listen has collapsed. The power online is held by those on Twitter with blue check marks, those whose influencer ranks are defined by their number of followers. We have the opportunity to bring people together. We have the opportunity to reimagine existing algorithms where the democratized crowd dictates the answer, that being the only goal. This problem is solvable. The piece parts exist. They just need to be put together. Technology nor intent is holding us back. The reason this problem hasn't been solved before is because the status quo has not yet been challenged. Communication, whether we're talking about people or trees, is about math. When you're talking to one person, that's basic math, 1 + 1. But as soon as you start talking to 3, 4, 5, not to mention large groups of 50, 100, 1,000, that becomes exponential. And exponential means that regardless of intent or intellect, you only have the physical capacity to hear a few. And those few tend to be the most senior, the most extroverted, and the loudest. So instead of everyone, like the trees, a very small percentage gets heard. The great news is math problems can be solved. I believe in an abundant world, a world of shared prosperity, a world where everyone is sitting on the same side of the table, working to find solutions to problems that have the potential to make our lives legitimately better. Yes, the pace of change has never been faster, the level of complexity never higher, the level of ambiguity never greater, and perhaps the degree of divisiveness in our culture never wider. In these moments that are sometimes stressful and sometimes scary, people are looking to the leaders of organizations for the answers. They're the people with the agenda. They're the people with the 5-year plan. They must have the path forward. We need to challenge this assumption. It's not the leaders. It's not me who's going to know all the problems to solve, all the questions to ask, and certainly not have all the answers. It's up to all of us. The small business owner on the west side of Chicago, the farmer in India, the entrepreneur in Japan, the college student in Venezuela. The literal democratization of access to prioritize the problems that need to be solved, to frame the questions that need to be debated, to engage in that debate and work to find solutions to the problems impacting the 99%, and to be rewarded psychically, reputationally, financially for their participation. With the pairing of people and technology, there's nothing we can't conquer. This is not about intention or intellect. This is about math. Now, I want you to think about a room you were in the last 3 or 4 days, in real life or virtually. Who was framing the discussion? Who was engaging in the dialogue? Was it 5% or 10%? Let's be optimistic and say it was 10%. So in a room of 30, 3 people were asking the questions, 3 people were engaging in the dialogue, and 3 people got all the glory. In this example, 3 people were responsible for solving all of the problems. Now let's imagine that same room where all of the brain power is activated, engaged, and harnessed into a shared community problem-solving engine, a shared brain operating at 100% capacity. A shared brain that, much like the World Wide Web, encourages people to participate, listens to everyone, and rewards everyone for their participation. A shared brain that ensures representation, that does not care what your zip code is, what the number on your paycheck is, what the color of your skin is, or what religion you practice. A shared brain that rebalances power, legitimately making inclusion a reality, not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the only way we are going to thrive, just like the trees. I run 1871, the #1 ranked private tech incubator in the world. I lead a community of more than 2,000 builders and innovators. My job, my literal job every day, is to create the conditions for everyone to thrive. And I wanted to test this theory. Could I tap into the collective intelligence, the shared community brain of 1871? Last November, I had a question. I wanted to know what the community thought we should do as we emerge from the pandemic. What does the post-COVID 1871 look like? I gave some constraints, some boundary conditions, but I really wanted to hear from the people that were experiencing it. I wanted to hear what they thought we should do. So we ran an experiment. We tested an actual algorithm. The community members submitted their ideas anonymously. Just like the trees, there's no bias, no hierarchy in who gets to participate, who gets to be heard, and who gets to be rewarded. Those ideas were then evaluated by the community. Ideas that range from 1% better to massive transformations, and everything in between. The experiment worked. We tapped into the collective 1871 brain. The crowd chose the top 5 winners. 5 people representing the diversity of our community, including a junior person on my team, a mentor, a university partner, a venture capitalist, and a founder building a business. A remarkable representation of the diversity of the 1871 network. Those 5 winners were then celebrated in social media, received 1871 swag, a gift card, among various other adulations. My idea, also submitted anonymously, also evaluated by the crowd, came in near the bottom. And if that is not proof in the pudding, I don't know what is. Now let's zoom out. Let's apply this concept at scale. And let's use the city of Chicago, the place I call home, a metro area of almost 9 million people as our backdrop. And instead of 10% or 900,000 people contributing, a number, by the way, that is likely way too generous and highly centralized in the local business district, assume that all 9 million people are engaged. Every Chicagoan part of an interconnected web. Each person a dot, an equal dot, connected into a network, leveraging an algorithm, and the abundant community that can look at any problem from as many different perspectives as there are people. There is no problem too big for Chicago's brain. Gun violence, education, public health, transportation, safe housing, clean water. We're all just a few connections and computations away from being solved. Chicago's brain follows the same formula as the World Wide Web. The more roots, bacteria, and fungi that are connected, the faster and more effective the processing power. The total output of our city could be measured by the percentage of the population that is engaged, active, and rewarded in the conversation. In less than 2 years, the entire global population of nearly 8 billion people is expected to be connected to the internet. What might we be able to solve when we activate the global brain? Think about where you live and where you work. What problems do you think are the most important to solve? What questions do you think need to be asked? What might you be able to create, discuss, build if you were able to engage everyone? Now, this idea of leveraging the wisdom of a crowd is not a new one. The idea of a shared brain that scales, an algorithm complemented by a community of relationships and an incentive structure throughout the entire discussion is the next wave of innovation. We are in crisis, and it's time to act. Let's mimic the trees. Each of us a node connected to one another, combining forces in order for all of us to thrive. I invite you to imagine the power of a shared brain for Chicago or wherever you work or live, and how we all can thrive with the other 90% engaged.
TEDx Wrigleyville presents the brilliant and multifaceted opera rap music recording artist K.F. Jacques in an original composition, music video, and fashion installments in collaboration with Akira Chicago. Fueled with an anti-hate message, Jacques will remind us to never give up despite the prejudice and disparity we face in the world. TEDx Wrigleyville is honored to join voices with those standing in solidarity with equality and peace.
We want peace, protect the streets. We want love, we'll rise above. Keep the faith, we'll conquer hate. What do we find when we try mankind? The time has come to break the chains. Freedom for all and all free of pain. Realize that we're all the same. Stop the hate and let's stop the blame. We won't give up until we see that the hate and the violence has finally ended. We'll never give up. We want peace. We'll never give up. We want love. We'll never give up. We'll conquer hate. We'll knock it down. Just keep the faith. We'll never give up. We want peace. We'll never give up. We want love. We'll never give up. We'll conquer hate. We'll knock it down. Just keep the faith. I ain't messing around. Everybody, let's make a righteous sound. Shout it out if hate can't hold you down. Can you hear the proud people through your bedroom walls? Then you better just wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Hey, baby, don't waste your time. Let's get started. The only way we getting down is on the floor. Don't pay no mind to words half-hearted. Now's the time to shout as one. We'll never give up. We want peace. We'll never give up. We want love. We'll never give up. We'll conquer hate. We'll knock it down. Just keep the is everything the world is supposed to be. It's close to me, the difference we post between the historically disenfranchised go-betweens. We standing on the shoulders of love. All you haters we love in spite of. Nevertheless, let's rest the hate rhetoric, lest we forget the ones that's never getting it.
Cammina in pace, parla con amore. Cammina in pace, parla con amore.
We'll never give up.
Cammina
We'll never give up.
in pace,
We'll never give up.
parla
We'll knock you down.
con amore.
We'll never give up. We want peace. We'll never give up. We want love. We'll never give up. We'll conquer hate. We'll knock you down. Just keep the faith. We'll never give up. We'll never give up. We'll knock you down. We'll never give up. 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 We'll knock you down. We'll never give up. We'll never give up. We'll never give up. We'll knock you down. We'll never give up. We'll never give up. We'll never give up. We'll knock you down. We'll knock you down.
From a low-income neighborhood in the Windy City, aka City of Broad Shoulders and Deep Dish Pizza, Southsider Shelton Banks has turned a blue-collar hustle into a white-collar hoodie. This brilliant CEO of WeWork Training discusses how to rework the wage gap and empower overlooked communities by infusing philanthropy into business development.
Imagine yourself standing in the middle of a busy intersection of a city like Chicago. Now, this intersection is unique for two different reasons. The first is that every street that connects to it has a different name and a different group of people that live there. So, for example, the street behind us, it used to be called Corporate America Avenue, but because I spend so much time in the tech industry, I recently renamed it Big Tech Avenue. And who lives there? Well, tech companies, SaaS, software, IT organizations, they live on Big Tech Avenue. Now, directly south of Big Tech Avenue, the name of that street is called Diversity Drive. And on Diversity Drive lives every conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Black, indigenous, people of color, and their communities, they all live on Diversity Drive. Interestingly enough, that's also where I'm from. Now, to the right or to the west of us, the name of that street is called Philanthropy Parkway. And on Philanthropy Parkway live all the nonprofit organizations, workforce development programs, and really charitable organizations are intent on helping people like me get jobs. And opposite of Philanthropy Parkway, to the east of us, well, that street's called Business Development Boulevard. And on Business Development Boulevard lives the entrepreneurs, those that like to make money and generate revenue, the salespeople, those that know how to sell themselves and sell others. The second thing that makes this intersection unique is that we're not just standing in it, no, far from it. What's happening here is a high stakes game of Twister. You know, the game where you have to have your hands, feet, arms, and head in more than one place at a time? So imagine right foot diversity, left foot technology, right hand philanthropy, left hand business development. Sounds easy? Not at all, but that's where I'm standing. You see, every day I'm helping people from diverse communities, Black, indigenous people, training them on business development, how to sell themselves and how to make money so that they can put food on the table for their families so that they can get into an industry that has been far from welcoming the tech industry. You see, I lead a nonprofit organization called Rework Training that's helped hundreds of individuals go from making an average base salary of $8,000 annually to over $55,000 annually in the tech sales industry. Not only that, but I've helped plenty of tech companies have a real impact around diversity, equity, and inclusion by not just hiring people that look like me, but donating their time and talent to training individuals on how to sell themselves and make money. We have this fun statistic that we like to throw around at Rework that if you combine all of the salaries of the individuals that we've helped over the last few years, the total equals $9 million. That's $9 million going directly back into what some people like to label as underserved or underprivileged communities. But I'll tell you that being from one of those communities, we don't consider ourselves as under anything, more like overlooked and untapped. I'll tell you something else, that being here in this intersection of my life experience has drawn me to the conclusion that when you make technology companies as diverse as communities and you introduce business development to philanthropy, that you can empower people to close their own wage gap. I know because I'm one of those people. See, I grew up on the south side of Chicago in a low-income neighborhood called the Roseland neighborhood, where the per capita income is $17,000 annually for a family of 4. Not only that, but I'm a high school dropout raised by a single-parent mother. I'm what some organizations would also like to label an at-risk youth. But despite being given those labels, I always had aspirations of going into corporate America. In fact, north of where I live, I can see one of the largest buildings in Chicago that represents Chicago's skyline, the Willis Tower. And for me, it represented corporate America, a place where I always wanted to go. But as you can imagine, low-income neighborhood means low-income resources. No one there to teach me how to interview. No one there to help me with my resume. No connections to recruiters or hiring managers. How was I going to make it into corporate America? Well, there are a couple of different routes. I could take Business Development Boulevard, I could take Philanthropy Parkway, or I can go straight into corporate America. But each of those routes presents their own problems. So for example, going to Philanthropy Parkway, most nonprofits in workforce development, they focus on helping underserved and underprivileged individuals. But again, I didn't consider myself as under anything. What often happens is because most nonprofits take a charitable approach, it often feels like I have to accept anything that they give me, like I'm a charity case. And no one wants to feel like that. Not only that, because they focus so much on making others feel good, statistically what happens is that individuals walk away overly certified, but underemployed. Now, opposite of Philanthropy Parkway on Business Development Boulevard, there are plenty of diverse staffing agencies and paid boot camps. And while they're well-meaning, oftentimes they will leave an individual like myself in debt, upwards of $10,000 in order to help me to attempt to get me a job in the technology industry. I will be starting in debt before day one of work. That didn't work for me either. And so what I decided to do, I decided to go straight into corporate America, straight to corporate America Avenue. But that also presented its own challenges. You know, despite my neighborhood being only a 20-minute drive away from downtown Chicago, it felt like often taking an international flight to get to corporate America. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, anybody who's ever been to the airport, no doubt, has seen the signs in the airport that says you can't bring any food, beverages, plants, animals, or anything where you're from to where you're going. And it's as if corporate America told me you can't bring your mannerisms, your culture, how you talk, your friends, anything about you from where you're from into where you're coming to corporate America. And so instead of diversity and an inclusion, it felt like diversity and exclusion. So it's said that most people spend 2,000 hours a year at work as a full-time employee. Imagine how it feels to be excluded for 2,000 hours a year. Imagine what it feels like to try to fit in for 2,000 hours a year. I attempted it, but it led me to a very painful point of differentiation, but also to the point where I'm standing here in this intersection. Despite doing my role a little bit differently in tech sales, I mastered my position as a tech salesperson. What that means is that on top of my base salary of $32,500 a year, I also brought in commission checks. And those commission checks started to exceed upwards of $10,000 on a monthly basis. $10,000 a month is more than some people in my community make in an entire year. But it also brought me two types of attention. You see, the company, they started to include me on things. They said, this guy knows how to make money. We have to ask him, how are you doing this? How are you speaking to customers? I was now included on everything. So I got a second type of attention from my friends and family. You see, I started dressing better. and driving better and traveling different. And they would reach out to me and say, Shelton, what are you doing? Are you selling drugs? And I would say, no, I'm selling software. And they would often ask, like, help me out. Help me get a job in the tech industry like you. Now, anybody who's ever referred a friend will often say that it carries the same weight of co-signing on a car. Your credit is at stake when you refer a friend to a job. But despite the fact I held these friends in high esteem, these were people that I admired, that worked harder than me, that were smarter than me, and I referred them to get jobs. But unfortunately, every last one of them got declined. They got the email that said, unfortunately, we don't think that you are a good fit. And all that I can think of is that, like an international flight, you don't bring any food, beverages, plants, your culture, mannerism from where you're from to where you're going. What's more, that feeling of inclusion that I once had started to make me sick. It started to feel like they were treating me as if I was the special person of color, as if I was different. But the reality is that I wasn't the special person. I was the person that was given an opportunity. See, the technology industry, by means of business development, gave me the opportunity to close my own wage gap. And there are plenty of individuals like me, untapped and overlooked, who have given the same opportunity, they can close their own wage gap. And so what would that take? Well, it'll take more people in the middle of this intersection involved in this high stakes game of Twister, where diversity, business development, philanthropy, and technology meet. You see, here in this intersection is where the real work starts and ends. Are you ready for that? Where if you are, like we said, rework, let's get this work.
First of all, this is really hard because taco is way more than something you can sum up in 2 minutes.
But it's really important for me to find other artists who inspire me, and I think Taco has really been a big help with that.
For me, Taco is a malleable space where young creatives can come together and collaborate on work.
It's incredibly rare to find an organization that has been and continues to be completely run by the artists and by youth.
What I like about Taco is it encompasses sort of all forms of art, exposed me to a lot of new avant-garde stuff compared to what I'm used to.
Taco is a place where I could venture out and collaborate with several different types of musicians.
I've just learned so much about the real world through organizing all of these events and keeping a real organization going.
Creating a community of youth artists in Chicago is something that's going to build the foundation of what Chicago becomes in the future. Taking a role in building that is what gives us meaning.
We now take you to the Chicago History Museum stage. Is the art world still very much ruled by the old guard? Ready for decolonizing? Coming to us from the Chicago History Museum stage, Artistic Director and DEI consultant Miranda Gonzalez is here to inspire the arts world to help us rethink its past, present, and future by revealing that decolonizing the art sector first begins with decolonizing our individual selves. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the land that I'm standing on. The land that I'm standing on is the traditional lands of the Three Fires people, the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations. The Chicagoland area is currently home to 75,000 tribal members and is the largest and most diverse urban Native community in the US. I acknowledge that the Indigenous peoples are the traditional stewards of the land that we now occupy, and that they have lived here long before Chicago was a city, and they are continuing to live here and thrive today. It's crucial for me to acknowledge the land that I stand on because its pre-colonial roots are what drive my work and my time here with you today. I am the producing artistic director of Urban Theater Company in Humboldt Park, Chicago. I identify as a mother and a Blaxican. I have African American and Mexican indigeneity mixed with the usual conquistador blood. I was born and raised in Chicago proper, and I have had an education through the Catholic lens for 16 years. I share all of this with you because it's important for you to know how I was socialized and give you just a glimpse of all of the things I had to unlearn over the last 25 years. And for those of you paying attention, I just gave away my age, and I never do that. The arts is the way that we show society what is possible. The arts sometimes imitates life and sometimes manifests it. And it's with that clarification that I say the following phrase. It's time to decolonize the arts, and that transformation is long overdue. What happened to your body when I just said that? No, really. What happened to your body when I just said the word decolonization? Did it tense up? Did it calm? When I say that phrase on panels or to funders or to clients in my consultancy, their bodies tell me where they're at in the work and their relationship to the word long before they voice it. In some instances, their eyes widen, their breathing changes, they purse their lips. In some cases, they take the deepest sigh, which tells me that they're ready to go forth into the unknown. But in most cases, their bodies physically react to me as if I threatened their life. It's a fear response. And it's the reason why I embrace taking a deep collective breath before digging into this work. So let's do it. Let's try that. Let's take a deep collective breath. Ready? The collective breath is the first step to releasing fear. It is the first step to making room for creativity. And making room, for me, is another word for holding space. And holding space is a skill I had to build slowly over decades. Learning to hold space is the groundwork for decolonization. And decolonization can only take place at the individual level, the self. The decolonization process is not a place. Many of my clients think that by taking a training or creating an affinity space or inviting more voices into the room that the work is done. So you can imagine their dismay when I say, what do you have in place in order to be sure that you are practicing this work every day for the rest of your lives? The decolonizing process, or decolonizing the self, in order to decolonize a process, is swimming against the current. It is swimming against the way that we are conditioned in this country. It is centering counter narratives. It is disrupting power dynamics. It's honoring transparency. The decolonization process is relinquishing power and control. It is the continual death of the ego, and it is the deepest level of work. When I first began my time in the arts, I began as a dancer, performer, and an actress. And over the years, I noticed that there was a gap between the way that we created art and the way that we administered it. I noticed that there was a lack of creativity and flexibility in the funding and administration process. I first became an arts leader by happenstance. I was a founding ensemble member for the organization. I was married to our mission, and no one else wanted the job. So in the name of marginalized voices, I stepped into the role. And I immediately realized that I was a terrible leader. Horrible. I had unrealistic expectations of the artistic process. I had unrealistic expectations of timeline. I had unrealistic expectations around communication. I was operating from a sense of urgency and perfectionism, and I was perpetuating the exact same harm that was inflicted upon me. I was overwhelmed, irritated, confused, and from one day to the next, I quit. I was never one to be validated by titles, so I just quit. And that's when I started to take a step back. And I started to assess all of my values. You see, I have this fundamental belief that I am responsible for 100% of the relationships that I hold. I'm gonna say that again because I'm noticing some side eye. So I'm gonna say it a little differently. I feel that I am 100% responsible for the way that I show up in a relationship. And it was because of that fundamental belief that I started to do introspective work. And I started replaying all of those moments where I felt the most hurt. And I started to ask questions. Did I really remember what actually happened? Did I remember the facts? Did I remember what that person said verbatim? Did I really listen? Like, was I open to listening, or was I just ready to respond? Did I foster or create a relationship from a place of nothing or from the present moment? When I answered those questions, I realized I didn't do any of that. I was ready to respond, ready to defend my decision-making, ready to fight for what I believed was right. Who wanted to be in a room with someone like that? Not me. Emotionally, physically, and mentally expressive space. That's what was missing. That's what I was holding hostage. How could anybody create with me if I was taking up all the space? I was filling that space with my insecurities. I was fearful, filling it with fear of inadequacy, fear of failure, fear of being judged. And that's when it hit me. That's when I realized. That was my aha moment. And that's when I realized I was oppressing people with my insecurities. I was not allowing anyone the space to give thoughts or opinions. I was oppressing them with my need to be right and to control. Oh, honey, was that a paradigm shift. It was like I was walking in public thinking I was looking all cute, and then I caught a glimpse of my reflection and realized my hair was a mess. That's how I was taking the leadership role, thinking I was looking all cute, and my hair was a complete mess, and I left absolutely no room for anyone to tell me to fix it. So when I was given the opportunity to lead an arts organization again, I took my time in giving an answer. And I started my process of asking questions again. Was I willing to center another artist's needs over mine? Was I willing to look at every critique as an opportunity for growth? Was I willing to create a process that was accessible to everyone, even if it was unconventional, even if people would meet it with fear? And the answer was yes. So a week later, I became the producing artistic director of Urban Theater Company. And my executive director and company manager and I started decolonizing theater. We at Urban Theater Company understand that the ground that we've broken is just the beginning. And we hope that it will empower others to help lay the foundation. It's a journey that my organization is on every moment. We have to communicate and over-communicate that our mission challenges the way that we are conditioned to make art in this country. We have to explain and re-explain that our community's needs are more important than the needs of the funders. We have to continually push our way to every table and remind people that the way that Shakespeare and Lorca told stories was never the way we did. The way we tell stories is the way our ancestors live on. It's the way our DNA travels through time. And that's worth fighting for. It's time to decolonize the arts, and that transformation is long overdue. Thank you. TEDx Wrigleyville is here today to celebrate humanity's repatriation, our return to home. But how did our cutest population, our young children, get through the pandemic isolation of 2020? The charismatic speaker and brilliant chess player, Pierce Cruz, interviews a few of those kids to show all of us that sometimes, even in the darkest of times, joy is found in the smallest of moments.
Oh, hi, my name is Pierce Cruz from TEDx Wrigleyville. Today I'll be interviewing some of my favorite kids about what got them through the pandemic to keep them occupied. Kids can look in the happy spaces when there's darkness, so some of my favorite kids will tell me what they did over the pandemic to make sure that they're occupied. Let's get started. You seem like a really happy person. So you have to have something that got you through the pandemic.
Something that got me through the pandemic was reading.
Well, I learned how to do cartwheels. Why did you want to learn how to do cartwheels?
Just looked like fun.
What got you through the pandemic?
I played the cello a lot.
Yeah, so I made this one in school. So it's basically a self-portrait of me, but like with the crown of everything I love on top of my head. So it was like a flower, donut, pencil, heart, peace sign, my puppy, a paintbrush, tree, sushi, and a fairy.
Sophie, what got you through the pandemic?
Well, I had a lot of creativity. I did music, I had art, and I had my jewelry making kit.
Kids are watching us. They're influenced by the people they look up to, but it makes us want to live right and be right and do right.
Can you do a little puppet show for us?
Yes. You know what would make my day? An ice cream cone.
Taekwondo. That's really cool. Can you demonstrate?
Yeah.
Oh my God, you are so cute. And I have it under great authority that you need Miss Caspian. Is that right, Caspian? Yes, you're very cute. So what got you through the pandemic?
I did chess. These two right here are the earrings, and this is a necklace because it's a whole set. And this is a ring.
That was amazing. Mind blown. Well, Amelia, I was really inspired by that. Thanks for coming. How does this knight move?
The knight can jump through people like this. Jump, jump.
I'm just gonna stand back here, 6 feet away. You know, because of COVID, not because I'm afraid you're gonna beat me out or anything like that. So Caspian, what did you learn during the pandemic? Look, he's gonna crawl. He learned to crawl, everyone.
Now, shall we play the game?
Well, there you have it. In the darkest of times, kids found light. Hope you have a chance to be like a kid today.
Now, Chicago's most famous Southside cannabis chef, Manuel Mendoza, joins TEDx Wrigleyville to discuss how and why we as a society should use legal cannabis to heal and regenerate communities most affected by the war on drugs.
What's up, y'all? My name is Manny Mendoza. I'm the chef by trade, and I got my start cooking with cannabis at the Culinary Institute of America. That's where I started to hone in on my craft and discover my passion for cannabis. Obviously, food was at the forefront of what I love to do, but connecting that and combining it with cannabis was something that I always dreamed of. And that's why I'm here today to talk about how legal cannabis can heal and regenerate our communities, because I come from those same communities. That's what made me go into starting Herbal Notes, a culinary cannabis supper club from Chicago to California. I wanted to create a space, a safe space for people to consume cannabis and to come together, because food is medicine. And when you introduce music and when you introduce amazing people, you start to create a recipe for an unbeatable, unmatchable experience that starts to form new bonds between those people. And that's why I think it's ever more important with the ongoing legalization and ongoing cannabis reform and it becoming mainstream, that it's more important now more than ever for all of us to become conscious producers and consumers in the cannabis industry. 3 pillars that we talk about at our Herbal Notes dinners is the cannabinoid, the medicinal and wellness benefits, and our social responsibility. So first I'll go over the cannabinoid or cannabis anatomy. That's where we like to talk to people about the actual plant because it's imperative for us to destigmatize that plant and to stop demonizing it because it's something that's so interrelated and intertwined with our human history that we have to come back to it. We have to find that connection back into agriculture and understanding that this plant has grown and has traveled with diasporas of people throughout millennia. We've been consuming cannabis as food, as medicine, cultivating it for textiles. That's why it's important for us to become conscious consumers and start to come back to cannabis as something that can be restorative, something that can be used to heal and regenerate our communities, which is what I'm here to talk about today. We've started to see intergenerational trauma start to happen over decades, and a lot has to do with the war on drugs. A specific targeting against Black and brown people and Native people. And now we see a turnaround where cannabis is coming back into our lives as a commodity. That duty falls on us as consumers to come back and to use cannabis as a force for good. One of the main ways we can use it as a force for good is through our tax dollars. Cannabis consumption, buying cannabis from dispensaries, all these generate so much money in the hundreds of millions of dollars. In Illinois, we have an R3 program, which is designed to bring 25% of our tax dollars back into disinvested communities. This is a great start, this is a great implement, but we need to do more. We need to shift our focus as an industry from one that's profit-driven to one that's driven by reparation and regeneration. Each state needs to recognize its duty to its citizens, especially in particular to its Black and Latino and Native citizens, the people who were caught under the steamroller of a broken industrial prison complex and broken policies that were used to harm one another. This is where my focus starts to take place at all of our dinners, where we introduce these pillars. We talk about the actual plant and we break it down because I'm a chef by heart. I love to cook. So I start to introduce the plant by infusing it in all types of ways, from the entire plant, the leaves on the plant, the actual foliage, to breaking down its compounds and components, utilizing its terpenes or aromatic compounds that give us those wonderful flavors and scents of gelato and Blue Dream and OG Kush. These are scents that enhance our mood and put us in a different place, a more positive place. And that's where we should shift our focus as consumers of cannabis. How can we use it almost as if it's therapy? Therapy for the hoods, therapy for our people. Being in Illinois right now, for example, there's a handful of operators that own the majority of the stake in the cannabis market. But we have basically 0 new operators, new owners that are Black, brown, or Native, when there's 0 diversity, there's 0 equity, and there's relatively 0 money being put back into the communities that were steamrolled by the war on drugs. We have all these barriers against us, but now we have a plant that's been here for thousands of years, really before us, but it's given so much to us, and it's given so much to communities of color. of indigenous backgrounds from all over the world. We need to shift that focus back to nature, back to the ground that it was cultivated from. Because that's where our real heart lies in humanity. This is designed by nature. We were made to receive cannabis. We even build our own cannabinoids. That's what endocannabinoids mean. They come from within. What we find in the plant world are phytocannabinoids. So it has to be by design that this plant gives so much to us. But now we have a whole new opportunity to use its economic benefits, use it as a way to start to push money and repatriate money back into communities that were targeted by the war on drugs. And we're now coming up on the 50th anniversary of its declaration. Even 50 years before that, cannabis was used to specifically target people of color, specifically Mexicans and Black community. That's where we are today, where we can undo that. We can start to form a new common ground, common goal to practice restorative justice through our consumption, through our purchases, through us demanding that we see more diversity and inclusion in the cannabis industry. We want to see more entrepreneurs of color with products on shelves and brands with ownership so that those people can take that money and bring it back to their neighborhoods and bring it back to their communities and step out of an illicit market that perpetuates a broken system. We need to break that cycle. And that's where I want to end my talk, by highlighting and focusing on what cannabis can really do for us and who it really needs to help. Everybody has a role to play. From the private sector, corporate cannabis, they have an enormous role to play, and the public sector and our politicians who write the language for legalization. That policy needs to be in the best interest of the people. The private sector's sales-driven goals should be in the best interest of the people. We need to shift from sales-driven reasons to goals of reparation and regeneration. Cannabis could do that. Thank you all.
Reinventability expands horizons as it educates and elevates perceptions of disability. We do that by encouraging inclusion, fostering a sense of community that is accessible to everyone, and inspiring joy.
I really love this dance course.
Party was the bomb. This dance party
It was awesome. Like how we got to move and just to see how much you can do in a wheelchair, how much you can do with standing up, and it's like no limitations.
Reinventability collaborates with Momenta Dance Company to produce Counterbalance, a showcase of integrated dance.
TEDx Wrigleyville welcomes Bradley Ross Nardick to our stage. Brad is not only the president of the Bazaar Inc., but he is also a passionate inclusion activist. He is here today to demonstrate how inclusion creates a virtuous cycle for companies, the people involved in them, and the communities they touch. We are grateful to present this important talk in the most accessible manner possible. Thanks to Ms. Shelley Engstrom-Gestel, the sign language interpreter standing behind him.
Imagine a man beaming with pride. He just bought his 16-year-old daughter her first car because she made the honor roll. This is a guy who loves his work. He shows up early and he stays late. Think of that person in your office who knows the name of every single one of his coworkers. That's this guy. He loves to contribute. He loves it so much that at Christmas time, he donated 50 coats to his local community church. I'm sure you know somebody with these qualities. Just imagine that person in your mind. Now picture a man who's been incarcerated, who's homeless, who has lived on and off the street his whole life, who has no credit, and who has never held a job for longer than a month. Think of that person. Well, you may or may not have guessed it, but that's actually the same exact guy. His name is Lawrence Johnson, and he is the assistant facilities manager for my company, The Bazaar Incorporated. See, prior to holding his position, Lawrence faced a cycle of no's. He was stuck in a pattern of absolute disappointment because as much as he looked for purpose and wanted to contribute, he couldn't. He was navigating a world full of closed doors simply because on every single job interview he went to go on, he had to check a little box that said that he had spent time in prison. And that's why, on the day that I met Lawrence, he was sweeping the streets of Chicago, wearing a Kara Clean Slate t-shirt. That's actually why I walked up to him. I knew what Kara was. I knew that Kara was a transitional work program built to help people who have faced homelessness and incarceration build skills to get themselves back into the workforce. And the reason why I knew that was I had had a call with Kara about 2 days earlier, where I learned about the benefits of their program, and I asked them to be part of the Bazaar Incorporated's inclusive recruitment community. See, 6 years earlier, I was also looking for purpose. Coming into my family's 60-year-old company, I wanted to build on what my grandfather and father had started before me. And while they had turned our little business into a market leader in the distribution of overstock consumer goods to local and national retailers alike, I couldn't imagine spending my days fighting for nickels and dimes and only having conversations about maximizing profit margins. I wanted to focus on something that felt bigger than that. I wanted to focus on people. And so I chose inclusion. I chose to focus on people who come from disenfranchised, often overlooked backgrounds. And what started 6 years ago as an internship for 10 kids with autism has since evolved. Over the past 6 years, we have invested time, effort, money, and energy into building what I believe is a world-class inclusive recruitment, training, management, and culture inside of the company that my family has owned for over 6 decades. And while Lawrence's story is amazing, it's truly one of perseverance, of overcoming. In the walls of Bazaar, it's actually not that unique. He's not the only person who works for us who has heard no his whole life. Because 30% of my nearly 200-person team are people who have come through inclusive recruitment backgrounds. Specifically, we focus on people with disabilities, and we focus on people who have faced homelessness and incarceration. Lester, who works in our warehouse, an injured veteran. Jackie, a young woman with autism, works in our stores. We have 7 team members who are deaf, 11 people in our employ who have cognitive functioning disabilities. Now that I'm even thinking about it, our receptionist, Walter, a brilliant guy who happens to be in a wheelchair. And for most of these people, they couldn't imagine a scenario where they would be allowed to participate into work. For most of the people on our team, it's actually the first job that they've ever held in their entire life. So why focus on inclusion? Why does any of this matter? Well, there's a growing inequity in our country where certain groups get eliminated for jobs before they even walk into the door. A According to a SHRM survey, only 3% of hiring managers will even take an interview with somebody who's faced incarceration. An interview. And the US Census Bureau has published statistics that shows that 1 out of every 5 people with a disability will ever find meaningful employment. Think of if 1 out of your 5 best friends ever had a job. So how do we disrupt this pattern? We end it by fixing the recruiting process. We have to stop looking for all of the little reasons why we should eliminate job candidates before they even walk in the door. Whether it's the fact that they haven't gone to a reputable university, or they have a gap in their work history, or even worse, they've been incarcerated, or roll into the interview in a wheelchair. These little things keep us from looking at people's potential. And we focus on this obsession with what seems like a quick fix to hiring, this relentless pursuit of what is efficient, looking for candidates who will have the least amount of work required for them to get into the job and become productive. But this pursuit of efficiency has caused us to overlook something that's just as powerful for the longevity and strength of an organization, and that's resilience. Now, I know what you're thinking. What's that mean? What does resilience look like in the workplace? Well, you can't measure it easily on an Excel spreadsheet. It's very hard to quantify resilience. But what resilience looks like inside the walls of the Bazaar Incorporated is Lawrence Johnson showing up at 4:30 a.m. Monday morning to work, thrilled, appreciative, enthusiastic to be taking care of 500,000 square feet of warehouse space. You see, the daily nits and gnats and problems that we encounter on our jobs are nothing compared to the reality of never being allowed to play the game, never being allowed to enter the workforce at all. And when Lawrence faces those problems, he has the stark contrast, like so many other members of our team, of that reality. Now, there are ways that we can measure the power of resilience in a workplace. This past year, as our company entered a global pandemic and we were deemed an essential business because we ship everyday use items to retailers all over the world, our absenteeism was literally zero. At a time when there was so much volatility, so many reasons to not show up to work, ours was zero. Our turnover rate dropped 10x to nearly 6%. And we experienced one of the most profitable years in our company's 6-decade history. That's the power of resilience in the workplace. But it's not enough to just give a job. That's actually only the first step of this. You must set the stage for success for every single unique individual who walks in the door. Every single person. I want to tell you about a young man named Gabriel. Gabriel came to us when he was 16 years old, looking to work his very first job he's ever had. And I remember the day that him and his father, Ahmad, walked into my conference room. I remember it for a few reasons. One is that in our world of inclusive hiring, it's actually quite common for the families of the people who we hire to show up with them. We joke that we don't just hire the person, we hire their entire support network. Because guess what? Sometimes it does take a village. And that's okay. Whoever said it wasn't forgot what the village was for. So as we sat in our conference room and talked about what's it going to take for Gabe to succeed, Gabe barely uttered a word. Not one word during that time. You see, Gabe is on the autism spectrum. And what that means is that sometimes it's incredibly difficult for him to talk to people who he doesn't know. And so as we discussed and we worked with Gabe's father and my team to figure out what's it going to take for Gabe to be successful in the job, we realized two things. One was that Gabe was a visual learner. And two was that he was literally terrified at the prospect of having to talk to hundreds of strangers a day. So the obvious choice was to make Gabe a cashier at our store. And the second thing we did was we went off to our office and we opened up Photoshop and we made a visual processing map with Gabe's face on it. We took him through each step of the customer service journey. And we sent Gabe off to the store. Full support of his manager, his father, and the business behind him, knowing that if he stumbles, we'll be there to pick him up. And this whole process probably only took about an hour longer than your traditional HR onboarding. There's actually a legal term for it. It's called a reasonable accommodation. The fact that we need a name for a team putting their new team member in the best position possible to succeed is crazy to me, but apparently we do. And Gabe was off. 8 weeks later, I walked into the store, I looked to my right, and here's this 6'1" kid standing proudly, exuding confidence, greeting every single person who walked into the door. And I had to do a double take. I honestly wasn't sure it was the same Gabe I had met a few months earlier. But it was. Because Gabe entered the workforce, faced his challenges with the full support of the people around him, and he realized a new part of himself through that process. Gabe's father, Ahmad, and I have stayed close. And when I talk to Ahmad now, he learned things about Gabe that he didn't even know during that time. He tells me that Gabe's social life is thriving now that he's graduating from high school, that he's actually become quite the chatterbox. That's the power of an open door, and that's the power of setting the stage for success for everybody who walks into a company. See, the old way of hiring is one where we think of people as a cog in a machine, and they are only as valuable to us as their output or their productivity. But the new way understands different. The new way of looking at jobs and the workplace knows that we must support every team member through their challenges and through their weaknesses, and we don't kick them out the door at the first sign of challenge or struggle on the job. The old way of looking at work is one where we only value you as much as you can add value to our bottom line. But the new way of work, the quantum shift in perspective that we understand, is that work is a mutual agreement. We appreciate as a company that you are going to commit your time, effort, energy, and your life to supporting the mission of the business. And in return, we're going to support you, your family, to better your standing, to overcome your challenges, to build skills on the job. It's a mutual agreement. When I think back to the blazing hot summer day that I met Lawrence Johnson and he was sweeping the streets of Chicago, I had been asking him question after question about how he liked working with Kara and how did he find himself there, and he finally paused. He stopped sweeping and he looked at me and he said, "Why are you asking me all this stuff?" And I said, "Lawrence, I just took over my family's company and I am looking for leaders." And Lawrence also stood up tall and he stuck out his incredibly strong hand and he looked me in the eye and he said, "I am a leader." And we shook hands on it. And in that moment, I chose to believe him and he chose to believe in me. And together, we kicked open a closed door. We interrupted years, cycles of disappointment, of no's, of closed doors. We changed the trajectory of Lawrence's life, his daughter's life, his family's, and the community that surrounds them. All it took was one yes, one chance. And so maybe we have to stop thinking about work as this place where the only thing that matters is productivity and profit and scale. Maybe we have to start thinking of work as a time when we can build our community, as we can contribute, enrich our lives with purpose, and hopefully support others to find theirs. See, this belief that what it takes to change the world is millions of followers online and billions of dollars of revenue is totally false. What it takes is appreciating that in every mundane little moment, we have an opportunity to shift somebody's life, to change their course. And so the chance to do this is with us every single day. It's actually here right now at this very minute. And it's always knocking and searching for you. And so when that opportunity does knock on your door, my only question is, will you choose to open it? Thank you.
Ziva Cruz is a budding poet, movie maker, scientist, writer, and singer. Since we come to you from just not any ballpark, but the iconic Wrigley Field, home of the Chicago Cubs, Ziva joins us to sing a very traditional Take Me Out to the Ball Game. It's a lovely day for a song in the ballpark. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Ziva Cruz.
Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I never get back. Let me root for the Cubbies. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
Back to our Chicago History Museum stage, we present to you Ms. Clarisol Duquie. Ms. Duquie is the state director for the United States Senator Dick Durbin. Prior to that, she served as Senator Dick Durbin's chief of staff for 21 years, during which time she served in many ways as the genesis of the DREAM Act. Ms. Duquie, who has frequently been in the room where it all happens, is here to discuss what it is to be an American.
My husband, children, and I just spent a wonderful time traveling through California. We experienced the majesty of Yosemite. We met farmers in the Central Valley and spoke to innovators in Silicon Valley, not to mention the beautiful sunsets we experienced along the way. But nothing compares to the feeling of coming home. There was a moment in my life when I almost lost the opportunity to be home. I was born in the US, but when I was 5 months old, my mother abruptly left to be with her dying brother in Mexico. She took me with her. Days and then weeks passed, and soon my mother became distraught. How would she return home to my father and our lives in the US? One day, 2 Catholic nuns visiting from Texas stopped by. My mother relayed her dilemma, and hearing her agony, the nuns insisted we leave with them first thing the next morning. And so, carrying only a small diaper bag, my mother and I set out with the nuns. As we approached the border crossing at the Rio Grande, my mother sat in the back seat and nervously cradled me in her arms. The nuns, in their dark wool habits, waved to the Border Patrol as we crossed into the United States. I was back home. For the better part of my childhood, my parents were undocumented. They raised me and my brothers and sisters in a predominantly Latino neighborhood in Chicago. We struggled, but like many immigrant families, they never flinched at taking the hardest jobs at the lowest wages to make it here. And like most Americans, their dream was to create a better future for me and my siblings. Being American to me is the notion that despite my humble upbringing, I could live up to my full potential and have as much opportunity to prosper as anyone else. For the last 22 years, I've been a public servant. Currently, I serve as state director for United States Senator Dick Durbin, the second highest ranking senator in Congress and chair of the Senate Judiciary. In my role, I meet people from all walks of life from across Illinois, from the dairy farmer downstate to the CEO in Chicago, to the manufacturing plant owner in Rockford, and school children everywhere. Over the last 2 decades, I've been a part of every immigration reform effort taken up by Congress. One of my first roles was as an immigration caseworker. helping people become legal residents and US citizens. But I'd never come across a case for an undocumented child. One day in 2000, that changed. My phone rang. It was the head of a nonprofit that provides music education to youth. She called about their most promising student, Teresa. Teresa was a musical prodigy. A self-taught pianist, Teresa had spent several years perfecting her craft alongside amazing musicians, competing at the top of her class, and playing in Chicago's most prestigious classical venues. As Teresa approached her high school graduation, her teachers knew that all the best music conservatories in the country would be thrilled to have her. But Teresa, she couldn't dare to dream about college. You see, Teresa was born in Brazil to Korean parents, and when she was 2 years old, they immigrated to the United States. She was now 17 years old, living her entire life at that point in America as an undocumented immigrant. So I called immigration and asked what we needed to do. I figured, given Teresa's circumstance, updating her immigration status would be an easy fix. How naive. Right away, immigration told me that Teresa wasn't an American. She wasn't a citizen. She wasn't a resident. She had no legal standing in this country. In fact, they said Teresa had to leave for 10 full years if she ever wanted the opportunity to return and live here legally. And in that moment, that response seemed, from a value standpoint, from my own personal understanding of what my country represents, it felt like the most un-American answer to Teresa's situation. But from an historic standpoint, it also felt like the most American answer possible. Our country's first naturalization law took effect in 1790. It said that free white persons could gain citizenship if they lived here for 2 years and had good moral character. And once they became citizens, their children could become citizens too. And so from the very beginning, our first naturalization law excluded Native Americans and all those who were enslaved. It wasn't until the passage of the 14th Amendment in 1868 that the US recognized as citizens all persons born in the United States. And even then, as a country, we've worked to exclude others. Chinese immigrants in the 1890s, Japanese immigrants during World War II, and more recently, immigrants from Muslim countries. Time and time again, our country has changed the rules, moving the goalpost for new immigrants, working to exclude those who don't fit a certain profile. In doing that, we've missed the point. Being American isn't about how you look, the color of your skin, or who you pray to. We wrongly describe ourselves as a country of immigrants. I believe we're a country because of immigrants. At every moment in American history, immigrants have given their brilliance, their labor, and their lives for this country. From the farm workers who toil in the fields in suffocating heat, to the founders of Fortune 100 companies, including Google, Tesla, Pfizer, and Intel, just to name a few. So you see, we realized we had a major problem with Teresa. This singular case that had made it to my desk had quickly inspired a movement. Teresa was dreamer number one, but she was not alone. We uncovered hundreds and then thousands of immigrant children who grew up as Americans but legally weren't. This is their home, and yet they're not legally able to live out their dreams here. Teresa's story would move us to create the DREAM Act, a pathway to citizenship for immigrant children. Following its introduction by Senator Durbin, the first Senate hearing was scheduled on September 12, 2001. On the morning of September 11th, I was scheduled to be on a flight to Washington, D.C. My flight never made it out of Chicago. And in the aftermath of the 9/11 terrorist attacks, there was a fury of anti-immigrant sentiment and punitive immigration proposals. In response, immigrants, especially Dreamers and their allies, took to the streets demanding fair and just laws. In 2006, this led to the largest immigrant support rallies that drew millions of people across cities. Over the next decade, there was a groundswell of support, though it wasn't always easy. In 2009, while boarding a plane to see her family for spring break, Karen, a 19-year-old college freshman, was stopped by a Customs and Border Patrol agent. She was detained, placed in a blue jumpsuit, and placed in isolation. Karen spent a harrowing 3 days in a county jail. She was immediately placed in removal proceedings and deemed not legally present. Karen had known no other home. She'd arrived in the US with her mother and sister at the age of 2. She knew no other home, and she had spent nearly her entire life here. She had earned a scholarship to attend college. She had studied hard, performed well in school, volunteered in her community, and was poised to have an otherwise bright future. When I took the call, I recognized the desperate nature in the person's voice on the other end. They needed help to stop Karen's deportation. So I called immigration and worked to secure a stay of removal so she could fight her case here. Soon, my phone started ringing with calls of case after case of Dreamers caught up in deportation. The calls came from Illinois and from across the country. Dreamers who were going about their lives, following the rules, were now facing the prospect of having to leave the only home they knew. I started to work on each case that came to my attention, working on temporary solutions to their deportation. The situation was so unreasonable, I found myself tracking Dreamers down from one detention center to another. Since its first introduction, Senator Durbin has worked to pass the DREAM Act in every session of Congress since 2001. And in the intervening years, the DREAM Act has been included in every major proposal of immigration reform, and it's been considered 5 separate times without success. In 2010, Dreamers came out of the shadows, knowing that being undocumented and unafraid was a way to ensure that their stories would be told for all to see in the light of day. Dozens of Dreamers in their caps and gowns even filled the Senate gallery one Saturday morning, a week before Christmas, to witness the vote. As for Karen, she was one decision away from having to leave her country, her family, and her hopes and dreams behind. On June 15th, 2012, 1 month after Karen graduated from college, I was in the car with Senator Durbin, who I consider the biggest champion of the DREAM Act. We're just a few minutes away from arriving at our event when my cell phone rings. It was President Barack Obama. In the quiet of the car, I could hear the president's voice. He had called to tell the senator that he was taking an executive action that very afternoon that would protect Dreamers from deportation and give them a chance to thrive in America. Immediately, the senator and I knew We had just achieved a bridge for millions of dreams. Right away, we got to work. Within 60 days, dreamers and immigrant communities from across the country mobilized so they were ready to register with the government on day one, August 15th, 2012. This is that day. Thousands and thousands of dreamers with their families came out to claim their place in history, Teresa and Karen among them. More than 800,000 youth have benefited from DACA and have gone on to contribute in meaningful ways. Today, Teresa is thriving in New York City. She's earned both a bachelor's and a doctorate degree from the Manhattan School of Music. She teaches, she gives back, and she's played at Carnegie Hall. Karen went on to obtain her law degree from Northwestern University and helps others who find themselves in similar situations she was in years ago. There are no words that can properly describe how I felt sitting in the audience at the Chicago Theater when Karen received her law degree. It's been 21 years since Teresa inspired the DREAM Act. I said earlier that we're a country because of immigrants. We're a thriving country because of the work, the drive, the resilience of wave after wave of immigrants, despite the challenges that each immigrant group has faced as they came to claim their opportunity, their place in America. They've prevailed. And because of them, America has prevailed. So I ask you, are Teresa, Karen, and the hundreds of thousands of dreamers who call America home, are they American? As Americans, we pride ourselves in the notion that this is the land of opportunity. Dreamers are the epitome of that notion. They've embraced our way of life. They live out our American values and ideals even before they're able to obtain America's full promise. When will we embrace them and give them the opportunity to make their claim in this country? When will we stop erecting barriers to the dream of opportunity? My mother likes to point out that when we crossed the border with the nuns, I'd been crying uncontrollably the entire drive to the border. So badly, she considered turning back, fearing my crying might be a bad omen. By the time we reached the border, I was fast asleep. And just after we were waved across, I gave out an audible sigh of relief that everyone in the car noted. I was home. I've dedicated my life to this country. And as I stand here, I can proudly say I've claimed my place in America. It is time that we create the same opportunity for the thousands of dreamers who've earned not only their place, but their home too.
That concludes our program for today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors once again, and of course, our exclusive partner, Avant, without whom today's programming would not have been possible. Thank you also to our MC, our wonderful performers, and our brilliant speakers. A very special thanks to the incredible curating team, as well as all the volunteers who were working tirelessly behind the scenes to make this program come to life. That's it for TEDx Wrigleyville, Humanity, the Repatriation. We hope that the return to normal finds you well and healthy.